All right, Mark, man, I am, dude, this is awesome. I'm so glad we had some technical difficulties to kick things off, but we are good to go now. And man, I'm so excited to have you on the Books for Guys podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, Mark, one of the main reasons I'm excited is because the genre of book that, or the genre of books that you write are, to be transparent, it's a style of book that I have not personally really deep dived into. And like for Books for Guys, it's the whole purpose is to get guys interested in reading, and we all have different interests. And so, traditionally, I've read a lot of sports books and biographies, and I've gotten into fiction a lot more over the last couple of years. But you have a style of writing in a genre that I really haven't been exposed to. And so I would love for you just to share your story, man, on just kind of like your background, how you got into becoming an author, how you decided to write the books that you write. Man, I just want to learn more about you.
Absolutely. That sounds great, Chris. Well, I'm Mark Everglade, and so I am a cyberpunk author. That's a genre of like dystopian science fiction. And for those who want an immediate reference as to what cyberpunk is, a lot of people think of, say, The Matrix or Blade Runner, or younger people may think of Cyberpunk 2077, a popular video game, or a variety of other genres or series that have come out of this. And so cyberpunk is really looking at our relationship to technology and the relationships of different groups of people, the haves and the have-nots, and really looking at power dynamics in society, and also kind of touching on some Cold War topics like authoritarian regimes and how everyday people can fight for freedoms and human rights. And so cyberpunk's a little bit different than other science fiction because it is not like set in space like Star Trek or Star Wars. It's very imminent and it's very here and now, usually set in the near future with a lot of brain implants and cool augmentations and tech gadgets. So yeah, this genre, I think it really appeals to a lot of people of various ages. It started in like the early '80s, and throughout, I think it's something that if somebody wants really action-packed, thrilling literature, that they can find something that kind of reads like a video game at times because you get virtual reality in there and augmented reality, and you get like guys, leveling up with different like cyber arms and stuff that they'll have. There is a philosophical depth for those who want to go farther into the dystopian kind of Orwellian stuff. I'm mentioning Orwell, like 1984. So there's that side of it as well. But I'll stop here for a second.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And as I've researched your work, they definitely seem like books like as a dude, I would be super interested in. Number one, like just because you say it's like the near future. And man, with like AI, and I'm in the technology space, so like I can conceptually understand what's going on. And there is a lot of like kind of crazy, scary things that are going on that are like it's reality now that maybe some people were writing in this space 15, 20 years ago. So it's
Oh,
really
yes.
crazy to think about. But just, I was reading like some of the summaries of your books and just like the characters and your thoughts. I know you incorporate AI into it as well. And it's just, man, again, like as a guy, all of this action, all of the, and I like to think too. So like it makes me kind of escape somewhat of real life to challenge myself to get into maybe a different world that's maybe not so far off into the future. But man, like, how do you come up with I know you're passionate about this and like your interest is there, but like what led you to being in, I don't know, your interest here? Did you grow up like reading similar books or how did that interest get sparked?
Sure. I mean, you grow up, and I was reading William Gibson and Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, and they were talking about virtual reality and things, but we barely had the internet. The internet was something that the government had, but we didn't have the internet. I'm 45. And so you're reading about these things like and movies like The Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity, all the Keanu Reeves movie, Johnny Mnemonic. They're kind of silly movies looking back. They don't age very well, but you see this idea of like the internet and people getting hacked and things, and it was kind of cool. But yeah, all that writing and everything, all the technology was really interesting. And around whenever we have a new technology that comes out, like the internet or now artificial intelligence, you have a lot of fear that surrounds that. And there's a gradual adoption that society has to this technology. And with AI, we see the same thing. People are kind of gradually getting used to it, but there's still fears it's going to take over our jobs and whatnot. And so we adjust, science fiction likes to adopt these technologies early and kind of address those fears and show how people can overcome them and show kind of worst case scenario, but also show ordinary people beating the worst case scenario. So I've always been interested in internet AI and just all this stuff. And when you read things 40 years ago that was science fiction, and now everybody's got AI on their computer, it's
Yeah.
just kind of surreal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dude, this is so interesting to me because and I guess because it's more of a reality now, like I said. So like for someone like myself, experiencing it in real time is just fascinating. And it's cool to talk to you because you were reading about some of this stuff, like 15, 20 years ago. So like you were trying to figure out conceptually what it meant then, and now you're living it and you're trying to write books that are maybe, like you said, 15, 20 years in the future. So, like, how are you creating your ideas of what you think the future is going to look like? Because, like, I feel like we're so advanced now. Like, some of these ideas don't seem as far fetched as maybe they did a long time ago. So, like, how do you get, for lack of a better term, like, crazy enough to create something that you're like, that really challenges what's possible?
Sure. Well, when I was writing books like Hemispheres, which I started writing when I was like in high school, I thought the idea of like brain implants and smart glasses were like really, really futuristic.
Yeah.
But now Tesla's releasing the Neuralink, and Meta and Google have AI glasses
I have
that
the
have little
meta
cameras in
glasses.
them and stuff. And so, really, yeah, you're right that it's all becoming very realistic. And we imagine these things early on, and then to see them actually come into being, it's an interesting translation, but also Cyberpunk's really interested in what is the social effect of all the technology.
That's
But
right.
one of the things we see, Chris, is that like today, 12%, about one out of every 10 people say they have no close friends. People spend on average 4 hours a week less with friends than they did 20 years ago. And three times as many people report feeling lonely. And so, despite the fact that we have social media, that we can have conversations like this, and that we're connected all over the world, there is an underlying feeling of disconnect there as well at the same time that's going on. And to some degree, virtual relations and online relationships replace in person relationships. And that's where you turn to the community for sports. And that's where you turn to music programs and other investments in school and education to try to teach those social skills that matter. I'm a father of four, and so it's something that is very precious and nearby to me.
Yeah, and I was reading how, like, you study this stuff in depth, and it's interesting you say that because I was having a conversation with about this exact topic earlier about just people being so disconnected even though you're theoretically, like, more connected than ever, but it's the way you're connected, it really the way we are connected now, it's not as intimate as it was before. There wasn't before it was more face to face and actual conversation. And now you can kind of like automate a lot of this in your thoughts and you just kind of skip over that. And then you don't realize like how important that is until you are feeling lonely and you don't have a close group of people you're constantly with. And so I could see where that could be something you really get an idea of what the future might look like, and that is pretty scary of, like, what will your kids and their kids experience, and, like, how do you change that, or do you think it's going to get worse? I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it is very difficult to see. Is it going to get worse in terms of connection and whatnot? I think we've reached a point where there is a lot of chaos and the fear is isolating people a lot. We have a lot of political turmoil. We have a lot of infighting politically between groups. We have emerged racial issues and emerged issues across various domains. And a lot of this is splitting society up into kind of two halves. And so that makes the world sometimes feel very fearful and volatile. And then social media can act as an echo chamber, meaning it can amplify some of these extreme signals on each side of the spectrum and put people against one another essentially. So the idea, if you ask me if it is it going to get worse, it's really based on our ability to find common humanity in one another, to find a brotherhood of all Americans, regardless of their politics or anything else, to accept the fact that we are Americans first, regardless of what we believe, and to, have that sense of unity. And so otherwise, it could go the other way. We could become increasingly isolated, increasingly confused over what facts to believe or not believe. And then that isolation and fear will make us easily controlled.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot to unpack there.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to it, a lot of ideas, a lot of, yeah, balance you have to find between the advancement of where we're going, but also like the importance of keeping some things that are important kind of the same in a way too. You can still improve, but like that tug and pulls there on what's important and what not. And so with your books, Mark, do you try and when you're writing, is your main purpose simply for to entertain your readers and your fans, or do you try to incorporate some of these messages and try to, I don't know, talk about the importance of things, how they could go south if we don't change? And I know you've got to do that kind of in a fiction type of way, but how do you put your message and thoughts into the books that you write? Or do you simply just write to entertain and you don't really think too much of it?
Sure. That's an excellent question, Chris. One of the things I try to do is take people who are very different or groups of people, factions that are very different, and find ways to force them together to work together towards a common goal, to put their differences aside. For instance, in my last book, Kill Switch Overkill, it's about a woman, Sabrina, who lives on an island, and she's on a flooded planet, kind of like global warming, and this planet in space has taken off to the point where everything's flooded. And essentially, a rogue artificial intelligence has gotten loose. And the intelligence was designed to regulate the economy and everything, but it kind of went haywire and infected her in her mind and infected her implants. And so the only person who can really save her is this tech genius that she always competed against in college and has always been like her arch rival. And so I like taking groups of like very conservative groups, very liberal groups, and people from different orientations and spectrums, and just forcing them to work together. Like if they do not communicate with each other and learn to get along, then they're not going to be able to challenge the larger problems of these societies in space. And so that really creates an interesting dynamic. Yeah, I've always loved those kind of shows where like two people start off hating each other at the beginning, and then by the end they're like best friends, even though they're opposites.
I'm the same way. I find it so fascinating, and I talk with people about this a lot because just with books in general, I love like challenging myself to read about somebody that maybe I think I don't like, or read about a situation that I think I know a lot about. Just like the more I read and like open myself up, I find myself maybe changing the way I think about something or looking at a situation differently. And so I love that through your writing of these style books, it's like a different approach to being able to maybe get someone engaged to think in different ways, because maybe they wouldn't like, again, like we're not all fans of the news, but obviously, like there's people on podcasts who are trying to do this that way, or there's people that are writing blogs and doing it that way. And like you're doing it through books in a different way of and saying like, hey, let's challenge some thoughts and scenarios here, and like let's deep dive. Let's think conceptually. Let's get a little dirty with it and figure, let's create some situations here that are challenging to think about. I just think that's so cool that you're doing that through your style of writing.
I appreciate that. I mean, I was looking at those books that really made an impact to me when I was young, and there were ones that had that message, like Fahrenheit, where Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit, where the government's burning all the books and the firefighters are there and they're trying to save the books from being. Those kind of messages really resonated with me. That those are the books you never forget. Brave New World, you know, and so it's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah. I guess what's something you enjoy? Because I'm assuming like I mean, you've sold thousands of books and you have tons of fans out there. And I was actually looking at some of the podcasts you've been on, and there's actually one on there that I know who she is. I think it's super cool. I was like, oh, Mark was on her, Trisha Copeland.
Oh
Her
yeah, which is great.
Yeah. So and I met her like a few months ago. So I saw her name. I was like, oh, Mark was on there. That's super
Nice,
cool.
nice.
But, like, your platform now, you obviously have people that are looking at you, they're excited for your work. What is something that you're most proud of that you've been able to accomplish by having a platform due to the books you've put out there?
A couple of things. So, my friends and I, we put together Cyberpunk Day starting about 5 years ago. And it was an annual day that we did every October. And we gathered people online, hundreds of people from around the world. And we had a whole day's worth of events that happened. Some of them were, say, collective storytelling, where people got together to write stories with a famous author leading the session. Some of it was custom synthesizer music jams in the Blade Runner style. Some of it was book readings, and others were like game run throughs, speed run competitions for video games, all sorts of things just to get people kind of involved in the different media that was associated with cyberpunk stuff. And then I have a website, markeverglade.com, and also it's somewhere where I've reviewed a couple hundred dystopian books, to try to give my thoughts on them, kind of select what was really good over the years of the thousand books I've read, what really stood out. And so that receives a lot of hits, and I'm pretty proud to be able to offer that as a resource for people who kind of want a reading guide, a quick look, like, if I want action, which one should I be looking at? What were the best 10 of the last 10 years?
Yeah. So I've got to ask, Mark, you said you have 4 children, right?
I do.
And you've read thousands of books and now you've written several. How do you structure your day to find time to read that many books and to be able to really put your thoughts out there on them? Because I don't have kids, I have a dog. And I'm like, man, I struggle so much with trying to read as many books that keep piling up on my list.
Sure. So it is a very difficult thing because as a father, you want to spend as much time with your children as possible and, teaching them, engaging them, playing with them in the yard, kicking the soccer ball. But it almost feels selfish sometimes to take personal time to yourself when you're a father. And you have to balance out that ability to sit down, have self expression, and realize that by engaging in creative expression, you are being able to express yourself. You're less likely to blow up and get irritated. That you time is actually essential time. It's not selfish time. And sometimes that can be difficult, especially when there's a never-ending series of demands that children, have. But that balance, it took many years, and at first I kind of put myself all into the arts when I was in my 20s. And by my 30s, I finally kind of found a balance of things and tried to incorporate them in what I was doing. So, for instance, music's one of my passions. In the background, there's like, synthesizers and keyboards and guitars. So everybody, all the children learned an instrument to play. So that was something that I could involve them in the hobby. My son looked at me writing and he said, I want to learn to write. I want to learn to write movie scripts or something. So I started proofreading some ideas with him on movie scripts. And so when you can share your hobbies with your children, you can create a balance easier because you're doing what you want to do, but you're also teaching them at the same time. But of course, you want to also allow them the flexibility to choose their own path in life and what interests them.
Yeah. Super cool. Super cool how you break that down. And it's really cool that they saw what you were passionate about and they wanted to do some of the things you like to do. So I'm sure that was super exciting where you're like, heck yeah, let's do this.
It is.
I got a lot of friends with kids. I've got a little niece and I know how awesome they are, but I also know like how much attention they need. It wears me out after a weekend. But no, but that's super cool. Well, Mark, let me ask you this. For your future vision of what you're wanting to do with books and ideas, what does that look like? Are you working on ideas and work all the time, or do you take time after you release a book to kind of like let people enjoy it and maybe speak on that? But like, are you constantly having ideas flowing and you're working on 3 or 4 different projects at once?
There are always ideas, but I found that I have to kind of separate myself from fiction for a while and try to do more nonfiction stuff. Try to do more academic type essays, social essays. I did my master's in sociology, the study of groups of how different groups relate to each other. It's kind of group psychology, it could be thought of for the audience, but essentially I find that to keep it positive, that with the social conflict I see around me in the world, that it's time not only to write, stories, which is one way we can communicate our values, but to also write some academic analysis of these things to inform people of my thoughts and opinions on the way direction society's headed.
Yeah.
So I'll be
And
switching to nonfiction.
I bet you can get a lot of ideas from your academic work. There's
You
probably a
can,
lot you learn and then you incorporate into some of your thoughts that you put into your books.
but definitely it feeds off of one another. You're absolutely right, Chris.
Yeah, that's cool. Again, this is so fascinating to me because I'm learning a lot and it's funny because people are like, like, dude, you started Books for Guys. And I'm like, yeah, but like my example is why I started Books for Guys. Like, I now know like how important reading and learning and like, I wish someone would have. I've always been interested in learning. Like I've always wanted to be smart, and I've always wanted to know things, but I didn't have anyone that really talked about the importance of books and how important they can be. And as I've read more and more, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to somehow create something that can encourage young guys to pick up on this skill sooner and this interest sooner because even like what you're teaching academically and then putting that into your work, I'm like, man, if I'd have read maybe some of Mark's books when I was 20 or 21, like what would my thoughts be and how would I approach different situations now? And so again, man, I just think it's so awesome the work you're doing in both academically and in through your writing. Cause I just feel like while it's entertaining, there's also some like amazing lessons that people can take away from it. And I just think it's really cool how you're incorporating both of those together.
I definitely appreciate that. With reading, it's like with movies and games and whatnot, you are told how to imagine a scene. And with books, you are in charge of your imagination. You can imagine the characters looking like pretty much what you want. You can imagine the scenarios, you can imagine the interactions, and the world building occurs not only on the page, but in your mind and imagination. There's a level of immersion there that I think that we are missing out on. Today, I think 1 out of every 3 people around 13 that they read for pleasure, but that is a little bit less than in previous years. But the younger generations are still reading more overall than the oldest generations. And so I think that there is this, you mentioned escapism. I think a lot of people are drawn to the escapism. And so that's the kind of challenge where you try to make things real and realistic, but also kind of escapist. And that's one of the reasons I set my books in space. It is escapist, but it's also close enough to our world that you can see the relevance of the problems that are being solved.
Yeah. It's not so far out there that you're
Yeah,
just like, you don't really know what to imagine or think about. I'm with you. I have to have some sort of reality in there to where I
yeah.
can create the world that's possible. If it's so far impossible, it's hard for me to conceptually even think about it. And I lose interest. I'm like, I don't even know what this world could even potentially look like. Mark, just a couple more questions for you. And I know we've kind of discussed at large throughout this whole conversation on this, but just in your own words, when people pick up your books and they read them, what are some things you hope they take away from the books? Is it a message? Is it enjoyment? Sure, it's a little bit of both, but like what is your hope that someone gets experience wise when they finish reading one of your books?
I want to say essentially that you can have thrilling action, but you can still have that, intelligent themes underneath of it, and that you can balance those out. But I want them to be inspired to read more. I want them to be inspired to write their own stories. I don't have an English degree. If people work at this, they can write them. And success as an author is only how you define it. Lots of times it means nothing if you sell X amount of books. Reaching that one person who that book was the one that changed their life. I think of books like Henry David Thoreau's Walden that completely changed my life. And so if you could just reach that one person, that makes it worthwhile. Um, so yeah, everybody's going to get something a little bit different based on the place they are in life. I mean, a young person is going to be looking at the dystopian future and identifying the problems of the future. And, well, how can we avoid getting there? What can I do now? While, older people will look back and look at the trajectory of time and look at their entire life, look at, okay, well, we've been here before. We got through the Cold War. We got through Desert Storm. We got through this and this. They may see it totally different as just a cycle of conflict, and so I think every generation is going to look at things a little bit differently and get something a little bit different out of it. But I hope it just speaks to them and that what they get out of it is directed by the reader rather than being imposed by the author.
Man, I love that. Because I agree. I talk about several books where when you read them at different phases of your life, they can mean something different, or you can translate it a different way, or you'll have different thoughts.
You
So
do.
it's so cool that you broke it down that way because I couldn't agree more. And you led perfectly into my last question for you, Mark. And I ask everyone that comes on the podcast this question because I'm always interested in what people are interested in and what they're reading. And you mentioned a book that had a big impact on you, but what are a couple books that have had a big impact on you, both professionally and personally? And if someone came to you and was like, "Hey, Mark, I need a good book recommendation," what do you like to recommend?
I'll do one fiction, one nonfiction. As far as like, for I think Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson is a wonderful book that's in the cyberpunk genre, and it's written in the '90s, and it's got virtual reality swordplay. It has young people, fighting against the system, but it also has Sumerian mythology and neurolinguistics and technology. And it's very philosophical, but at the same time, there's also young people skateboarding around trying to hack shit or stuff. So, essentially, it's Snow Crash is wonderful. They're even making a movie out of it. On the nonfiction side, I'm currently reading Anger, Rage, and Relationships. And so, you know, a- as a man, like when I think of the way my father expressed emotion, it was usually either kind of neutral, laughing, or anger. And so, I think there's an opportunity, at least for me, to kind of look at, well, what is the role of anger in relationships? How can you identify things that would become conflict? How can you address these things ahead of time? And how can you, teach your children good anger management skills? Which has been the most rewarding thing I ever taught my children was anger management. And so I think that's always kind of important, especially when there are, so many stressors. We're working such long work weeks nowadays, 50, 55 hours. Yeah, there can be it's a lot. Like you said, even the dog barking at the end of the day can be a stressor. So learning to kind of meditate, take breaths, relax, that's equally important.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's awesome. Man, Mark, this has been one of my favorite conversations because again, I'm learning a lot from you. And I mean, I talk to a lot of authors who either they're way into their genre and like that's their work and that's great. But it's so cool to talk with you who you're on both sides of it. You have your writing and then you have your academic work and it like you get to spend time in both places and I just think that's so cool because I think that's good for people. It's kind of like me reading fiction. It's good for me to escape everyday life and just kind of like get lost a little bit and spend time, outside of my own head and learning different things. And so, but it doesn't all have to be serious. It's a good break for me. So I think it's super cool that you spend time having an impact in one area and also being creative in another area and how they just correlate. So man, I just really appreciate you taking the time to do this because I think a lot of people are going to find your work fascinating and what you do fascinating. I think like me, I'm super interested to read all of your books now. Like, okay, now I kind of know what Mark's all about and like what he's trying to put out there. So, like, now I have a gist of what to kind of think about as I'm reading them. So, I'm super excited to read them now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's a great show, and I appreciate, your vision, for expanding reading and readership among, the teens and other population.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, and we've got your book on the website. I'm gonna get all of them on there. We've got your latest book we have on there, Kill Switch Overkill. I didn't realize all the other work that you have out there, so we'll have that posted on the website soon. So anyone who's interested, they'll be able to find your books, and obviously we'll have a link to your website too. So if anyone's interested in seeing all the cool things that Mark's done, all his interviews and articles out there and books, you'll be able to find it as we'll post the link. But man, Mark, keep doing what you're doing, man. It's super exciting and can't wait to follow you and see everything that you continue to accomplish. So, like I said, man, just keep it up. That's awesome.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.